So I want to talk to you today about meeting God in the routine do-overs that you get to do day by day, and also to meet God in the occasional radical shake-ups of life. Because I think that's the summary of those two parables. One's about day by day by day by day routines, and the other one is about occasional, like, flip the apple cart over, and see what happens with that. And so I think we go through all of those. So it's all about do-overs and shake-ups. How many of you play Scrabble? Any of you play Scrabble ever? Okay, now we have special rules whenever we play Scrabble. And one of the rules we follow is this, that if you get 3 vowels or 3 any same letters, you get to throw them in and get new ones. See, so we can have a do-over, Now I think we just lose 5 points or something like that. Now, we also have a rule, and I think most people have this one, and it's the rule that whenever you get like halfway through the game, if none of your letters are working together, because all the letters are all like junky letters, like you have 3 U's and no Q, that kind of a thing. So you can kind of like cash them all in and have a total shake-up. Do you play like that? And it gives a freshness, doesn't it? It gives like a newness to the possibility of being able to play Scrabble. So we have a lot of do-overs and we have a lot of shake-ups. Not as many, but we have them. So this past week or so, I was away in Florida. Ken and I were away, and we have not a biological grandson, but we raised a niece, and she has a child who is 6 years old, and his name is Dylan, and he calls us grunkles, so we're like the grandparents. So anyway, they were there for about a week, and so I had a chance to spend a lot of bonding time with him. And one of the things we did was, there's a pool there, and so we were doing a lot of pool stuff. And so we got into this game where Dylan was outside the pool, and I was inside the pool, and we were throwing the frisbee back and forth. The pool frisbee, how it all works. And so what I noticed with him was that whenever he'd make these like lounging catches, so I'd throw one, it would just go a little bit off, and he would lounge and get it. As soon as he got it, he would just throw it immediately, And so oftentimes it wouldn't go like that. It just went this way and was short, or it went into the other people's, lounge chairs, all this kind of stuff. So I pointed out to him, I said, now Dill, if you want to really, make some progress here, before you actually throw it again, just take a moment, okay? Just take a moment to focus, just one brief moment, And I was showing him how to do it. And so eventually, we started to count out how many we got in a row, and we got 4. Wow. And then at that point, he says, "Uncles, let's do more." And so we did, and so we didn't get to 4 like 35 times. We didn't get to 4, but then we made 7, okay? So we made 7, at which point he then says, "Grunkles, let's do it again." Oh God, So 35 more tries at this, we got to 9. Okay. Now I was there getting like, "Oh God, we got to stop this," And but Grunkles, how about some more? Well, anyway. We ended at 41. Now, it was about 2.5 hours later because of all the do-overs that we had to do, but we got to 41. Now, about halfway through, or maybe even a quarter of the way through, I was totally frustrated. I mean, I was ready to pull my hair out. I didn't want to do this anymore. And I wanted to stop, but his energy was just kind of like making me do it. And then, you see, what happened in this whole process was I had a revelation. See, because we can meet God in the plain old do-overs. And here was the revelation I got, that he has never been to 4 before. He'd never been to 7. He's never had that experience of having the patience of getting to 11. He's never done 22. And so I then, halfway through, started to realize I am being present with him, hitting all these new benchmarks. And boy, did I feel good. And I started to think to myself, wow, this is all worth it. See, you can meet God in the routine do-overs that go on in life. But sometimes then what happens is we can't stay in do-over mode whenever we have to move to more of a core shake-up mode. So I'm aware of this executive. He got a job as a CEO of a new company. And so before he took on this job, his predecessor decided to give him a couple tips. And so, he told him different things that he can do and try and this kind of thing. And then he left him with 3 envelopes. And they were marked A, B, and C. And he says, so this is my last gift I'm giving to you, is that hopefully nothing ever goes wrong. But if it ever gets to that point where something will go on, go to envelope number A and see if that won't fix it. And then you have B and C just to hold back on. So 6 months, in the new company, things are going well. Market share is wonderful. They're getting good reports. Wall Street likes them. All kinds of things are happening. And then a downturn. Loses 2 employees. Marketing director gets into trouble. All kinds of things start to happen. Their shares go down. And so he doesn't know what to do. And then it dawns on him, go and check the envelopes. And so he goes to them, picks out envelope A, opens it up, and it says, when things go bad, blame your predecessor. So he goes back, and that's what he does. So he blames the predecessor, explains how this all happens, and people kind of like get with it. So they're with it, and up they go. They're performing again for another year, several quarters, and then they have another experience of going down. And so he says, I got envelope B. So he goes to envelope B, he opens it up, and it says, now reorganize. So he goes through, hires new people, gets new product, closes off some streams of business and opens up other ones. So everything gets reorganized, and 2-3 years, perfect. Everything's good, things are going very well, and then so he says, I still have another envelope. And so he goes and he gets envelope C, and he opens it up, and it says, create 3 envelopes. All right, see, sometimes you have to know when it's time to shake it up, or you have to experience a shake-up. Now, if you don't experience your shake-up, or if you deny it's shake-up time when it's actually shake-up time, you might actually move into a very threatening kind of activity. So I'm told about this taxi driver who his first day on a job is running his first fare. And everything's going well, and then all of a sudden, the backseat fare person, decides to give him a direction, but the guy doesn't hear it. So what the backseat fare guy does is he leans his hand over and taps him on the shoulder, at which point the taxi driver goes and starts to drive the car off the road, goes in a field, ends up going up a sidewalk, and finally, after all this rumble and tumble, gets the car situated and goes, oh my God, never do this again. Never do that again. And the guy in the back said, I never thought just tapping you on the shoulder would cause such chaos. And the guy got his breath back, and he said, well, actually, it's not your fault. Not your fault at all. This is my first day on the job. And prior to this, for the last 10 years, I drove a hearse. You see, so if you don't have aware of yourself that you're in shake-up mode, okay, or things are now turning, then it can go bad for us. So let's look at the gospel in terms of these 2 ideas: routine, do-overs, and finding God there, and then occasional shake-ups and finding God there. So. Little context of Luke. So we're in Luke chapter 14. I know last week we had our first entry into Luke verses 1 through 6. Julie preached on the Sabbath, because it's all about the Sabbath. See, Luke 14 is all about the Sabbath. And so in last week's readings, what happened was Jesus cures a person on the Sabbath. Okay, now this is really interesting, because that's a setup for, I am going to upset the apple cart, folks. See, because you don't do this on the Sabbath. See, you don't go curing people on the Sabbath. That's work. That's against the Jewish law. So you're not doing this. And so we're in this kind of like, I'm going to have upset time. You're going to have a shake-up going on here in some way. And so here's what then happens next. In our gospel for today, a Pharisee invites Jesus to a meal, to a banquet. Now, Jesus gets invited to 3 banquets with Pharisees so far. This is the 3rd one. Now, if you notice here, they are keeping a close eye on Jesus. Did you hear that in that sentence? Close eye on Jesus, because he's up to something here. See, they didn't kill him for no reason. You know, there was a reason why he ended up, politically being an enemy or a perceived enemy of the people. He's doing a lot of things that are upsetting the apple carts, you see. And so here he is then. They're keeping a close eye on him because after all, he just killed someone on the Sabbath. Now what's going to happen? And so we get a parable. And so what propels the parable? Well, it's Jesus' experience. So what he notices is that some of the guests who've been invited into this banquet, they're not in the correct seats. Now, is that a big deal? Well, in Jewish law, that would have been a big deal. People would have known better in a sense. But on this day, they weren't in the right seats. I don't know what he observed. Maybe he saw a 3rd cousin twice removed, now in the mother of the bride seat. Who knows what it was. But there was some kind of thing there that he's observing. And what Jesus tends to do next is just give a good piece of advice. Okay, so here's a practical piece of advice. Whenever you get invited to a banquet, know who you are. Okay, now, there will be days that you are mother of the bride, so make sure you go into the mother of the bride seat. Now, there will also be days whenever you're the 3rd cousin twice removed, make sure you go into that seat. You see, be appropriate. That's what this is about. I don't think this is any miraculous kind of insight, and it ends by saying things like, those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. So it's just practical. Isn't it better for you to be invited up than to be thrown out? It's just practical advice. Now, I actually had this happen to me on an airplane. My mode of transportation for my work before I became an Episcopal priest was airplane. So I flew every week. And so I got spoiled occasionally. And here's how I got spoiled. I traveled so much that oftentimes, the reader of the ticket would see that I'm a frequent flyer person, and they would upgrade me to 1st class. I got that a lot. I grew to expect it. And there were times then, whenever I didn't get called to do that I would sit back there thinking, when are they going to call me? And I didn't get called. And so I was going through a bad streak, 3 or 4 times not getting called. And so, by darn, I'm going to get called this next time or else. And so I remember going in, still wasn't called. I was sitting in my seat. Then I decided, there's 4 first-class seats up there. One of those is mine. And so I went up and I took it. Whoa. That's your priest. That's what I do. Stuff like that. That was before I was received. So the stewardess came and said, "Sir, may I see your ticket?" And I gave, and she says as loud as she could, "You're not in 1st class." And I said, "But I'm a frequent." People pay good money to be in these seats. Oh my gosh. And I kind of went back. Boy, did I learn this gospel passage, all right? See, it's practical. So whenever you have a chance to have a do-over, do it over, you see, because God can be found in those things, even though they bore you, because Dylan wants to do another series of hits. All right, now, the second parable is not routine. It's not a routine do-over. It's probably the one that most of us have never focused on much. But here's what it is. It's prompted by the inviter. So the inviter that has Jesus coming. And Jesus notices who's invited. And this is not a surprise to most people because this is what the Jewish people and the Hellenistic people would do. Who's invited? Friends, relatives, neighbors with money. So in other words, the whole group there is a group of people that can pay you back. So the parable is then, whenever you invite, don't invite those who are related and that can pay you back. Invite instead the sick, the crippled, and the lame. Those who cannot pay you back, because in the resurrection you'll be rewarded and reviewed. Now, when you think about that, aren't you asking the question that most of us, I think, would ask? Why in the world would Jesus have a parable that says this? It goes against everything that feels right to us, doesn't it? I mean, it just doesn't seem to make sense. And so I think we're left with the question, why is it then that Jesus would talk like this? You know, why would he invite us to do such contradictory to our human experience and to do it and to make it kind of like important? Why would that happen? Well, you know, whenever you talk about Jesus Christ, you know Christ is not his last name. Jesus is that man who walked the dusty streets of Palestine, of Galilee. Christ is the Christ of faith. Christ is the Godhood that Jesus grew into or understood or appropriated, whatever word you want to use. See, that's what it's all about. Now, Jesus, Christ, has a very different view of things. Not an ordinary view. And that's why he can say stuff like this. See, one thing we know and we hear about Jesus all the time is he's already brought in the kingdom of God. See, what he's telling us is the kingdom is now. Salvation, you don't have to wait for it in the future when you die. Salvation is always already possible for you. See, that's what Christ does. It means that eternity is in session now. See, so Jesus has the view of the absolute presence of kingdom. See, now whenever you get a view like that, then it's kind of like the veil between this earth and that earth for a moment is parted. And you see things differently, and everything that we hold important in this world is minimized and relativized and melts away because it's worth nothing. In fact, St. Thomas Aquinas, some of you may have heard of them. I know, Larry, you've heard of them. You know, St. Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologica, you know, one of our greatest theologians, you know, during his dying period, he had 1 week before he died, on day 2 of his dying process, the reports come back that he had this incredible experience of God. Just this experience of God. In fact, people said that you could just tell something was happening with him, and then he woke up back into reality again. At which point when he woke up, he said, "Brother Reginald, come to me." And he did. He said, "Brother, go and get every book that I wrote and burn it, because it's worth nothing." You see, whenever you have that view, that experience, or what Richard Rohr calls when you become God-soaked, for one moment, that's all you need, and you start to relativize some of the things that we did hold important. See, that's where Jesus is coming from. And that's what our invitation is. You know, I remember once seeing that with my Aunt Helen, my mother's sister, and she died many years ago. And maybe you've seen this, maybe with someone who's dying, or maybe you've had this experience, you know, because I think I've had 1 or 2 of them in my life where I just had temporarily in a meditation or in something, I had this sense of connection, you know, and a lot of things that used to be important are no longer important, but not everything, you know, but I think we get glimpses of this. But I remember my Aunt Helen, whenever she was in her dying process, she was a very political woman, and she was very opinionated in her life. She had tremendous opinions. And so this was around the time when Nixon was resigning and stuff like that. And she would have been a person who would have been really happy about that. Okay? So she was on her dying bed, you know, and she was talking a lot whenever we came to visit her, but you could tell that she was moving on. And so the headline came out in our paper, "Nixon resigns." And I thought, Aunt Helen will love this. And so I remember taking it. I must have been like 9 or 10 years old. I wasn't that old. You know, and I remember taking this, you know, to her, being really excited to give it to her. And I gave it to my Aunt Helen, and she goes, that's what she did. She just went, and didn't do anything else, which hurt my feelings. And my mother said, "She's in a different place, Regis. She's having a different experience," which calmed me. See, I think that's the kind of thing. You get to that place, or we have these moments here and there where many things that we hold so important in our life because we earned them, we deserve. These different things that seem to be so important, like, are you wearing the right color vestments? You know, do we have the right music tempo? All those things that we hold important are really not. You know, whenever you have that moment of faith, that moment of Godness, when we're God-soaked, have that moment for a moment. So, you see, that's why Jesus will say these things. See, because there's something about bringing heaven to earth. There's something about seeing as God sees. And that's what we get an invitation to do today in that second parable. See, that parable is dynamite for us if we can get it ignited. Because that's going to give you permission to do something that is extraordinarily not what the earth and the world holds to be true. See? I mean, look at where we're in today, the things that are important to people. You know, things like this, that I deserve. If you're not a part of me, then you don't count. You know, all these different kind of things that we hold as significant and important. They're really not in the whole scheme of things. So, one last thing. When we left Florida the day before, we went to a Dollar General store. Okay, you've been to them, right? And so I popped in to get something real quickly, and I was out the door. But here's what happened. On the way in, there was this rotund, beautiful-faced, full-faced lady who was probably in her 60s, who was the clerk at the register. And so as soon as I got in the door, she bellowed out, "Welcome to the dollar store. It is so good to have you." And she went, "You look great today. You've been in the sun?" And she's there checking people out, and she just said, "Whatever you need, just go and get it." She was just like that, and she did that to everybody that came in. Then I checked out, and she was just so refreshing. She complimented me on my choices. I mean, all kind of stuff. You know, it was just incredible. And so, I mean, I left there like I had just gone through a car wash. I mean, I was just feeling like totally clean. You know, and so Ken then decided to buy something, and so he was 2 or 3 or 4 people behind me, and so I was there waiting for him. And so this lady was doing this beautifulness to everybody, you know, and you wouldn't expect it in a dollar store, would you? I mean, see, that's the thing that is so kind of like crazy in a way. And so she was doing it to everybody, and so then the lady right before Ken was up, and she was paying for her goods, and she was missing a quarter. So she had everything, but she didn't have a quarter. So all of a sudden she said, "Oh yeah, I don't have another quarter." Everyone in that row, Ken was going through his wallet, he had a quarter out, and 5 other people behind her, they're all in their purses getting quarters. They almost fought over giving this woman a quarter. It was just amazing. And I thought to myself, why would that happen? And it was that lady. She brought a little countercultural shake up, make heaven touch earth moment, and there it was. So, my brothers and sisters, that's the parables today. Find God in your routine do-overs. Also find God in those occasional shake-ups. Amen.